the challengers and the bargainers. You describe this, this sort of two templates in A Bound Man, to which every African American, between which every African American has to choose. Challengers and bargainers. Now, maybe the quickest way to get to this is to describe the contrast between Louis Armstrong, between two trumpeters, Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis, both of whom you write about beautifully. You know a lot about jazz music, there's no doubt about that. But give us Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis and explain what they say about the black experience in this country.
Well, what they have in common and what all blacks have in common, and it's an inevitable part of the minority experience, is masking. When you don't have as much power as the mainstream society, you have to learn to present yourself strategically so you can offset that power differential in some ways. Here's Louis Armstrong, a musical genius who transformed the music not only of America but of the world. Born poor black in Jim Crow, New Orleans. As I say in the book, his talent was so big he couldn't just stay behind on the black side of apartheid. He had to come out into the mainstream. How do you do that? You wear a mask. In his case, he took some gestures from minstrel shows. He'd bug his eyes out. He'd smile relentlessly. He'd bow too much, and he'd show homage to whites, and he'd say, "I'm going to entertain you, but I'm not going to presume to be your equal." And so I'm not going to call into question this whole Jim Crow thing, that your involvement in this. You're going to be able to listen to me, and I'm going to entertain you, and you're going to go home feeling good.
And he's a prototypical bargainer. The bargain is, you let me play my music, and I won't upset your world.
I won't bother you. I'm not going to become a protester. And so people then, as always with bargainers, they love him for that deal. They love Louis Armstrong for that deal, and it only made him more popular and more successful. Miles Davis is the challenger. Miles Davis comes along after the World War II. The military's integrated, schools are integrated, the world's changing. Whites are beginning to feel guilt about what has happened in the past, and so Miles turns his back on his audience. No bowing, nothing, no affect. Between sets, he curses them out, but that too is a mask, because in a sense whites flock to see Miles Davis. We're happy to be insulted by him. Would tell stories of it, because again, I can be insulted by a black, which therefore indicates I'm not a racist. I'm above that national shame, right. And so it was a mask that worked superbly for Miles.
All right. Now you propose a thought experiment. I'm going to quote you and ask you to explain what you mean here. Again, we'll come back to Barack Obama in a moment, but you say things here that place him in context. Quote, suppose Oprah Winfrey suddenly presented a series of programs making the point that individual responsibility was the greatest power available to black America. Suppose she announced that racism, while still a nuisance, had receded to the point where individual responsibility could at last pay off. Suppose she said that we blacks, like free peoples everywhere, should be entirely responsible for our uplift, whether or not help or even fairness came from others. What would be the likely consequence for Oprah Winfrey, one of the great bargainers of all time, were she to go down this road?
She would lose her iconic status overnight. Her career would. She's an enormously talented woman, and so there'd certainly be something for her to do. But the Oprah that we know, this sort of almost magical figure who can sell books and so forth, that would all be gone. That's precisely what Bill Cosby did.
Bill Cosby did it.
He did it. He said what he really felt and broke the golden rule of bargainers: never say what you really think. He broke it, said it, lost his iconic status, no longer sells Jell-O, because now...
I can understand. I follow the argument easily. It's intuitively graspable. Mm-hmm. Why, if she starts talking about individual responsibility, she will upset the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons of the world, because they have, as you explain, a vested interest in white guilt, right? But ordinary African Americans, and ordinary white people. Why doesn't it? That's not as easy for me to grasp.
If Oprah Winfrey says, "I think blacks ought to be that personal responsibility is the greatest source of power we have," meaning blacks should be more responsible for their own uplift, what white person is going to stand next to her then? Because the instant a white person stands next to her and preaching, in a sense, to blacks and telling them that they need to be responsible for their own uplift, that white person is going to be seen as a racist.
Right.
Any black person who stands next to her, if she were to say that, would be seen as a sellout, an Uncle Tom, giving away black power. So Bill Cosby, who did say that, enters a kind of exile, and that is the way it goes. We have not moved beyond that yet. For blacks who don't wear either one of these masks, bargainers or challengers, they enter a kind of exile, at least in a metaphorical sense.